excellence and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. I am stoked for this one. Pat's rejoining us. Jason's back on the show after quite the hiatus, but I'm really excited. And as I am excited, you should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which is, of course, Fridays for The Collective, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, throw them up in the comment section. We can hit those throughout the show. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of really interesting thoughts coming out of this one because we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive. But before we get into what we're talking about, let's, you know what? I just forgot. Make sure you're signed up for the newsletter as well. There we go. The Reinforcement Loop, our weekly newsletter that goes out every Sunday. Get your little tidbits of information from the show itself, and as well a little bit of Sean's brain candy. It's a good time, good read. Make sure you signed up for that. So let's get into the intros right now. Pat, give us a quick little 10-15 seconds. Hit us.
Pat Miller, 20 years in the military, 8 of which special operations, mainly special boat teams, operations warrant in CSOR, retired professional photographer, military armourer, film consultant, and that's it.
Bam. And friend of the show. And like, you're also one of the crew. I like it. Jay, quick little rundown. Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff.
Right on. I'm Jason Dempsey. I was a base brat, born in Germany, lived all across the world with an RCAF father. Joined the RCAF myself, did a little under 7 years as a pilot. Got out. I'm now a rotary wing and fixed wing professional aviator. And I founded Blackbird Industries back in 2017 because I wanted our military to have better esprit de corps, better kit shops, and just take more pride in what they wear and what they do.
Bam. I like it. Look at that. Succinct, to the point. I love it. Sean, how's life out in the mountains?
I like it. I mean, come on. First of all, we've got to establish the what the boys just said in respect to their quote unquote resumes is pretty rad. But what I do like is Pat has now been on enough and Jay has been on enough that they feel more comfortable building out who they are in respect to their professional careers, because now Pat has got a bit of a rhythm. He's added a couple more things in there, and I like it. Owning the path. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. I love it, man.
I dig it. So, quick little intro here. Dan C. jumped in. Good morning, gentlemen. In the immortal words of Genghis Khan, Namaste, and kicked ass today. I like it. And then 9-3 Baker here jumped on. Hells yeah on the Instagram side. Good to see you, buddy. We're going to have him on very shortly as well. So it's going to be a good time. Now, let's get into it. Unsung heroes. I want to get your guys' first thoughts on that. That's the concept. Where does it take you when we mention that? Jay, I'm going to hit you first. What do you think?
There's multiple facets to it. The unsung hero is one who, performed incredible acts and maybe has been lost to time. What he's done has been lost to history. The new generations aren't aware. They're not aware, able to learn the lessons of what happened in the past. And then there's the other angle, is those who just want to perform those random acts of kindness, do things in their daily performance of their duties, never looking for any recognition. They just, a good enough thing for them is the nod. We all know the nod, and they just carry on.
Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic. I think I say this every time I'm on a podcast. It's an interesting topic. But it's like I'm almost anti-hero a lot of times. I can be because it's kind of like, a lot of times people are just put into extraordinary circumstances and they perform. And then there's the ones that are, they are kind of just true born specimens of human beings, and I see them as teachers and mentors, and I'd love to learn from them more than, I guess, hold them as heroes, but they should still be recognized. That's kind of where I'm starting off.
I dig it. Sean, what do you think?
I like it. And I like it because the entire topic makes me feel extremely uncomfortable because I don't really understand the true definition of what a modern hero is, never mind a past hero. So society as a whole has got a whole pile of various definitions of what a hero is. And I'm still trying to figure that out, maybe. But it's worth mentioning that this topic came to be because of Jason, and some conversations that we'd been having in the background, Chance and Jay and myself. And then of course, around the drop zone this summer at Operation Pegasus Jump up in Campbell River Skydiving Center. And Jay mentioned, he said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this guy?" And I was like, no, not really. And then he's kind of launched into the idea of who we're going to be talking about, one of the characters we're going to be talking about today. And Jay kind of positioned it to me as such. And like, coming from the wrong guy, I would have like raised my eyebrow and thought, "Oh, what did you just say?" But coming from Jason, it was the way he delivered it, it was right. Because he said an individual's name, and then I said, no, I don't know. And he said, "Well, as a sniper, you should probably know about that because, the history of this individual, his, we'll call it pedigree per se, is so unbelievable that, like, I should have known, but I didn't." And, if it would have been some jerk who was like poking me in the chest saying, "You've never heard of this guy," like it might have gone sideways. But Jason did it super respectfully and challenged me in a way that I was like, "Oh, this has got to get sorted out." Now, I know we've been talking in the background about sorting it out, but in that moment, in those 10 seconds, I was like, "Oh, this is changing right now." So this conversation today is partly, it's been a long time coming, but without a doubt, when Jason dropped that name, and I was like, no, I felt it, man. And so we got to set the record straight.
Yeah, and I really hope that I pronounced his name correctly. I went searching for it, and I came up with like 4 or 5 different pronunciations of Francis's last name, and then I got Pegahmagabow, which is, I'm hoping that's correct. But yeah, Canada's most decorated Indigenous soldier of World War I, credited with 378 confirmed kills as a sniper and captured of 300 plus prisoners. He's awarded the Military Medal with 2 bars. He's one of only 39 Canadians to do that. And after the war, of course, became a strong advocate for Indigenous rights and self-determination. And I mean, that's just a small list. Jason, you want to give us a little bit of a rundown?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an incredible story. I mean, you have to start from the beginning, and we could go into all kinds of details over the next bit of the conversation. But your general rundown is a young mid-20s Ojibwe young man working for forestries industry in the Georgian Bay, Perry Island region of Ontario. Britain declares war. Canada declares war almost immediately after. He signed up the first day. So he signs up the first day, gets shipped off to Valcartier. Within a few days of that, the policy changed within Canada, and Indians and visible minorities were actually discouraged from service. And at that point, many of them were already in training in Valcartier and getting ready to do, they're doing their basic training, getting ready to go over. And most of them were actually turned away. They did their basic training and said, "Yeah, we're going to hold you in reserve. We're not sending you over as a frontline troop," just simply because of the color of their skin. He was so good that the individual who was in charge of making those selections literally, just as we just said, just kind of gave the nod, didn't care, sent him. So he was a founding member of 1st Battalion with the Canadian Corps, and off he went on the very first ship over to England. Soon found himself in the Second Battle of Ypres as a message carrier, becoming a scout, and then eventually, as that battle moved forward, a renowned sniper. And just to summarize, he fought in the Second Battle of Ypres, went down to the Somme. He fought in the Third Battle of Ypres and Passchendaele, back to the Scarpe in the 100 Days Offensive against the Hindenburg Line. He was gassed twice, shot, upper hernia, survived pneumonia in the trenches, and ended the war with the most confirmed kills of any shooter in the entire conflict. And that's just his wartime story.
So not a lot. You're saying, he just like, average soldier. Here we go. But well, I want to get some thoughts right on this alone. So I want to pass this around. Pat, what do you think about that kind of pedigree? What does that bring up in your mind?
Well, see, like this is like, when we talk heroes, I mean, this sounds like, somebody that not only would I look up to and respect, but I want to know more of the story, and and because you're just in awe of, almost like the demigod level accomplishments. You know what I mean? Like, we throw the term hero around so loosely now that it's really, I'll just say it's gross. And then you hear a story like this, and you're like, well, yeah, that's a hero. That's a hero, and that's how we should reserve that term. You know what I mean? For, you know, acts and gallantry like that. So I'm already enthralled by this story, and I'm like, you know, leading in for more.
He's in. I like it. Shaun, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I feel the same way. And quite frankly, I think that these kind of stories need to be told like more often, probably at least once a year. And not just to remind everyone of the story, but just to recalibrate everyone as to this loose language, as Pat said, that gets thrown around like frickin' Skittles. Everyone's a hero nowadays. You know, you hold a door open for someone, and now you're a small hero. But you hold it for 10 people, now you're a big hero. It's the inane things of life, the little minor consequential moments have now kind of reached the categorization of you can be a hero if you get across the finish line of your 3K run. And that doesn't work for me. It never has, and it never will. And I appreciate that people are out there running a 3 kilometer run and crossing the finish line. I'll applaud it. But you're not a hero. You're just someone who ran 3 clicks. And so I know it sounds super harsh to categorize or contextualize what a hero is and what you aren't. I'm not a hero. I don't see anyone on this panel who's a hero unless I'm missing anything. Like, to me, heroes are freaking epic demigod, like Thor level. And so, as Pat said, this loose language helps maybe set the stage for, well, how did we lose our way? Is it because everyone wanted to be a hero but couldn't be, or is it because everyone just wants to be part of the hero gang, and you know, we've lowered the bar so low that now you get to be in that team? I don't know what's happened over the last 40, 50 years, but certainly hero is being thrown around far too much.
I can throw something in on that quick. Is the fact that, you know, it holds a mirror up to our current society, right? So if we only said like the heroes, like most of the heroes are through hard times, and we haven't had really hard times recently or lately. So that holds a mirror up that we really haven't done anything, and people don't like that. They're like, you know, they don't want to feel that, if you will, right? And so it should be the opposite. That mirror should be held up so you go, why am I not doing more or becoming more?
I have a thought on this, and I just want to hit these comments real quick before we jump into it too deeply. Matt Demancic jumped on here. Good to see you, Matt. Love you guys and always appreciate your deep, open-minded talks. Wanted to pop on for a few, but if I don't make the distance, it's because I'm sick as heck, brothers. Keep up the good work, and authentic conversations among the warrior communities will do. Yeah, and then Dan C jumped in here and said, just like a bunch of millionaires taking a field to play a game and the announcers say they're going to war. Yeah, no, they're not, which is, it's a similar thing. So I want to get more information first off from Jason before we get too deep into this. You said that was just his wartime service. Can you give us a little rundown on post-war service as well?
Absolutely. So he returns. He was actually invalidated at the very end of the war. So he signed up on the first day, went over and fought for almost the entirety of the war that the Canadian Corps was there, with the extent of a few months where he was invalidated back to England to recover from injuries. He actually was invalidated a few days before the war actually ended for what they called exhaustion psychosis, which we know today is post-traumatic stress. He effectively went manic. He confronted an officer, a medical officer at a well, believed him to be a German spy, held him at pistol gunpoint, and people had to talk him down. He witnessed so many horrors that he effectively lost his mind in a bit of a way. So he's in hospital in Britain for 4 to 6 months before being sent back to Canada. And upon returning to Canada, you know, he's this war hero with, you know, one of 39 Canadians with all these medals. He's one of the most decorated Canadians of the entire war, easily the most decorated Indigenous veteran, still is to this day. He receives his medals. He's pinned by the Prince in Toronto in front of 50,000 people. They brought the royal family over to do that for the remainder of the Canadians who hadn't actually been given their medals. And from there, that's where the story turns really sour, because he becomes just another man on the reserve, having to fight for the rest of his benefits and rights through the Indian agents at the time that ruled those communities with an iron fist. He was denied his disability. He was denied his pension. He was denied a whole bunch of other benefits that were given out to other Canadian veterans at the time, from land to horses to help clear lands for homesteads, and on and on and on. I believe it took him over a decade for him to start to get his pension from the Indian agent. And that riled him up for his family, his community, and all the other Indigenous communities within the area. He became an activist, fighting back against the Indian agents and the government of Canada, eventually becoming the supreme chief of the National Indian Government, I believe it was called, which is a precursor to the Assembly of the First Nations now. So in 1945, there's that infamous photo of him with his local community's headdress, chief headdress. And he was, going back to Ottawa and trying to ban all of the Indigenous communities across Canada for better treatment against the Indian Act. And that was kind of his final 25, 30 years of his life, was being a hero for his own community and enacting those changes.
Man, it's a difficult thing to think about a time period where there was such just blatant hatred, but it is something that needs to be brought up as well. And I want to go around the table on this one. So, Shaun, I'm going to start with you. What do you got?
Well, it's disgusting. It riles me up. It actually kind of makes me a bit furious. And so, without getting, overly emotional or shaking my fist and ranting and raving in a monologue, I'm going to try to keep it in check and just say that, man, that guy was done wrong, obviously. But, just to maybe try to keep it positive, because he was done wrong, he then doubled down and did double right. I mean, the guy is already a legend, and that is another word that is thrown out far too casually. The guy's already a legend, and then he doubles down to double legend. And so, I mean, does the system create the hero? Or was he always a hero looking for a cause? That's a great question that bubbles around in my mind. And so rather than ranting and raving about the injustice of the historical moment, I'm more curious about who he was as maybe a young boy. Was he always a hero? Or did the system create a hero? Double hero.
Interesting. Pat, you got any thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think what Shaun said is pretty interesting, because I think that, there's no way that he would have been a hero without the circumstances in which he was put into. On the flip side, again, I find this such an interesting paradigm to look at, because it takes a certain man or person, a human, to step up to those things, and not only step up, but be extraordinary. And isn't that what it is, right? It's being extraordinary. He wasn't extraordinary. He wasn't just a guy that got through this, or he banded together. He was in the fight, but he was a presence. I don't know how to word it better.
This is I wrote down heroic acts, which is, I think, the key is that I think the terms get thrown around like hero or legend. GOAT is another one that's now like all over the place, right? Like not everybody can be the greatest of all time. There's going to be one. But the point is that, like, I think it has to do with the fact that you're trying to describe such a big act, some sort of massive thing that has just happened, and there's no real words to describe it. Kind of like you're saying, Pat, there's nothing tangible to kind of grab onto, at least in my mind. And I kind of want to play with this a little bit. Jason, you got any thoughts on this concept we're tossing around?
It's to really go back on the whole conversation. We're in kind of the participation trophy generation, right? Where everybody has to get their due, and everybody's a winner, and everybody, is deserving of that kind of praise and respect. But like this story is kind of, and the ones we're going to talk about are reframing that. You really are, in a way, a victim of a circumstance to become a hero. You training and doing your job, whatever that may be, and doing it right doesn't give you that title. It is all about the circumstance and overcoming extraordinarily difficult odds, whatever they may be. In this case, we're talking about a warfare. You're really thrust into the moment, and people adapt and overcome that moment, or they break under the pressure.
I'm wondering if this has anything to do with the fact that, especially, not only are we in the participation generation, I agree with you on that one, or the participation award, but we're also in the last little while, the removal of statues, like the removal of memories, the removal of histories, and like both the good and bad, I think, are required. So to the point, of, yes, bad things happen, but usually, sometimes, or I can't say usually, sometimes really good things come out of those bad periods. I was reading a book at one point, and the author was talking about how only in war can you see such acts of valor and heroism and companionship and things like that, because the circumstances are so extreme. And I'm digging where this is going. Shaun, what do you got?
Yeah, like as a generalistic comment, that what you just said, Chance, holds its weight. It is true. But I think it's a very narrow perspective because, I mean, let's just throw out Terry Fox's name. And so he's considered a Canadian hero, but he wasn't dodging any bullets. He didn't have pneumonia in a trench. What that dude did was step up to the occasion and kick that ass, but on such a level that people felt it. Like he was in it as we'll call an average Canadian, and he rose to the occasion every single day on the behalf of everyone else. And I think that's what heroes are, generally speaking. At its core, any individual who's suffering from pneumonia in a trench but still wanting to go find another shot probably isn't doing it for themselves. They're doing it for the bigger team around them. And that doesn't often get talked about enough. And I think that that's why we have such loose language around the term of hero or amazing accomplishments. I've done some pretty interesting things in my life, but I would be so embarrassed if anyone called me a hero. And whatever I've done, it pales in comparison to people that I'm friends with. I have friends who I consider to be like, holy cronkamole, I really have to pick up my pace. I've got to pick up my game. I got to try harder. I got to do more. I have like close friends, distant friends, minor acquaintances who I consider as way better people than I am in respect to this topic. Like the things that I did in the military it wouldn't even be a word on a page. But I've got friends who could write a novel in this topic in respect to their military career. So I think that it's important to establish maybe right now that all of us have done things in our lives that are of minor note, perhaps. But I don't think any of us, unless I'm missing anything, boys, I don't think any of the four of us has done anything heroic. And so, but I do know people who've called me a hero. And I've got to put them in check right on that moment. Dude, I am not. And I never probably ever will be. Because as Pat said, I don't think it's about who you are and what you want. You want to be a hero? Okay. Well, start running around the world looking for that moment that you can't plan. Because heroism often comes like sideways at you. It often comes like a lightning bolt at you. These aren't things that you can set up as a Red Bull moment. Let's plan to be a hero 6 months from now. Let's make the bike jump so high that it's heroic. That ain't heroism in my book. That's just a dude flinging himself off a big jump and maybe landing it and getting a free can of Red Bull. It's not heroism. That's just kicking a bit of ass. So heroism is a whole different level, and I think that it's misunderstood because as Canadians, we don't have good context. There's people running around with stickers on the back of their vehicles that, they've got the what's half of a marathon. That sticker. I did a 1.4 kilometer run. And so, like all of a sudden they're the neighborhood hero because they've got the sticker on the back of their vehicle. And that's where we've come to, is because there's no context. like the heroes that we're talking about right now, average citizens, myself included, have lost the scale of heroism, perhaps.
Okay, so I have a question on this then, and can it be taken too far though? Like obviously, especially as Canadians, I don't think we do this well at all. We have a very self-deprecating kind of culture where we don't need to talk about that. Like, no, we'll just do the thing and just keep your praise and stuff over that way. We don't do that. The kind of I don't think we really appreciate our own accomplishments as Canadians, if that makes any sense.
You're
And,
extremely humble, if not to a fault.
if not to a fault. Okay. It brings up the scene from Guardians of the Galaxy where Drax is like, and I am also incredibly humble, right? Like it feels that way just even talking about it. But can it go too far? Can it then become like chest thumping? Can it then become could our praise for somebody for certain heroic acts like Francis, could it go too far? Could it become almost propaganda-ish, like almost silliness? You know what I mean? Like it. What do you guys think, Pat? I'm gonna come to you.
Yeah, of course it can. And we're I think everybody in society is guilty of it at some point. I won't say myself personally or even the people on this panel, but as a society as whole, yeah, we do it all the time. And then sometimes a lot of times for people that aren't even heroes. Like I've never heard of Francis before. I mean, this guy should be like way more propped up and known about than anything. It's like when, basically when you're in battle school for PPCLI, like, we go deep into Tommy Prince. And if you read his whole story and his history, like, he was an extraordinary human being, and it's not talked about enough. And then the people that are like moot or unimportant, I won't say unimportant. Maybe they've done something legendary or important, but it's not an act of heroism. I think heroism is like, it's hard to define, but in a sense, it has to be way above and beyond and an act of service. And there's probably some other elements in here that I'm probably missing, that might be defined in this conversation because yeah, I completely agree with you. Sometimes we go too much, propping someone up and not propping others up. We can put our war helmets on just for a quick second. I'll tell a story of a guy from my battalion. I consider one of my best friends. He was like literally a hero in Afghanistan. I mean, he didn't get a medal. I don't even think he got like mentioned for anything. In fact, he gave an order to another guy to do something, and that person got the medal. So he's in the ambush that Goddard got KIA'd. He was the very end of the convoy. He ran to the front of the convoy, started organizing the U-turn to get everybody out of the convoy and the firefight back towards. He's running into carriers, pulling out M72s, having a RPG M72 volley fight with the Taliban. Gets everyone turned around, start exfilling. Now his vehicle's at the front and he's at the back. He's trying to get into a vehicle. Nobody will let him in. He ends up riding out on the bustle bin of a G-Wagon, right? Of this freaking firefight. And nobody even knows like really anything. The kid that he told the kid to move a burning car, he got a military medal of valor. And this kid literally calls my buddy almost in panic. Like, hey, I don't know if you know they're gonna give me this medal. He's like, I know, it's cool. I don't care. He's like, whatever.
Yeah, and I think that like there are a number of stories from the Afghanistan period as well that is just unreal, and it's the stepping up into the moment, right? Things need to be done. That at the end of the day, I think that's what it really comes down to, especially when you're overseas, and it doesn't really matter what war it is. In the moment, things need to be done, and the person that steps up and gets that stuff done, it usually has to be heroic because the circumstances are dire. And yeah, it's crazy. Jason, you got any thoughts?
The flip side of exactly the story that Pat told is the unfortunate part of stolen valor and people using their heroism and accolades they have or have not deserved, to use them for personal and monetary gain. And that I think is about as foul as something can do. I think we've seen a lot of that starting to happen more often than in the past with the invention of social media. People have bigger platforms, are able to do this. There's all kinds of monetizing stuff, and that's really the ugly side of the overhype. And people start to believe their own hype, and that's when that can really go sideways, and false idols are created.
Yes, and I mean there's there's a number of those all over social media. It's, sadly enough, that's happened all over the place. And I mean, like Shaun, you've been accused of it a couple of times, right?
Yeah, I'm like super careful on this topic. When I first got into social media, of course, I knew nothing. But as things unfolded, people started like labeling me as this and that, and I was super uncomfortable with a bunch of labels. And that's why I love this conversation, man, to be able to establish that we're all just kind of a bunch of normies in context of heroes. And so, if by now people haven't picked up what we're putting down, it's just that heroism is such a level, almost an unachievable level, that you can't plan for it. You can't run your life as a career to become a hero. You can't plot it out like a Gantt chart. You can't pursue heroism, I believe. What you can pursue is your best effort, and then bam, that lightning bolt hits you sideways, and then you're into it. And it's what you do in that moment. That's where maybe the best version of yourself is shown to the world. That heroic moment, perhaps, that you have to step into, or you should step into. These things just don't come around as planned events, I believe. I don't think you can Gantt chart it. I don't think you can Red Bull campaign it. I just think that you have skills or abilities and heart and soul, and you step into the fray, and you take care of what's got to be taken care of, and then you step out of it, and you quietly go about your business afterwards. But in social media nowadays, everyone's looking for a win. And that win is sometimes established through artificiality, through contrived events. I could spend the entire podcast talking about just this simple topic of artificiality of heroism out there. But I don't want to do that because I know that we've got some stories to relay in respect to actual heroes, actual Canadian heroes that have done substantial enough things that they're truly called heroes. So I'm going to pass on the mic and bite my tongue.
I like it. A couple comments I just want to touch on. Dan C. jumped in here and said, and generally, you have to be told before you realize it because it was just another crazy day. That's a great point, is that like usually these acts are like, it's Tuesday and they just happen. And you just managed it best you could and you came out of it, and that was that. On the Instagram side, Ethos and Eros Project jumped in here and said, we're all apes in vegetable clothes. Well, yeah, when you break it down, really. And this one, Polar Nights, as a barber, I love this. In the men's cameras, it is every stage of beard growth. And we got a good little program here. I like it. I do want to get into Tommy Prince, we're going to talk about next year, but I wanted to just touch on this because we've been kind of dancing around the concept of heroes. And I can't think of anything more descriptive, like that you think about when you think of heroes as like the Victoria Cross. You think about I think of the Victoria Cross because we're Canadian, but the Medal of Honor, the British, New Zealand, there's a lot of Victoria Crosses out there, but like the highest awards for heroism is usually what I think about. And I have the definition of one. So the Victoria Cross in Canada is awarded for the most conspicuous bravery, a daring or preeminent act of valor or self-sacrifice or extreme devotion to duty in the presence of the enemy. And I just wanted to put the wording out there, and I want to see, actually, you guys got any thoughts on the wording in that and what that means to you? Jason, I'm going to hit you first.
When you compare the Victoria Cross to, say, the Distinguished Conduct Medal, Military Medal in World War I, at least in the context of Francis Pegahmagabow, they have slightly increasing severity, I guess you would say. There's gallantry and doing your job and going above and beyond what you were required to do. There's that to another level, and then this was effectively self-sacrifice and you survived, is almost the definition of the Victoria Cross. Extreme circumstances in which you performed your duties well above and beyond what you were expected to do. And the real main focus of that Victoria Cross is in the presence of the enemy. We've seen some incredible Victoria Cross citations, same with the Medal of Honor. We could go into the whole how Jess La Rochelle and the Valor in the Presence of the Enemy group is trying to get the military honors and awards done by a nonpartisan independent group to get his upgraded. We have to do justice to these men who have rightfully earned it. I think by not doing that is humility to a fault, as we discussed earlier. And in the case of Francis Pegahmagabow, he is actually one of the individuals that Bruce Moncur, General Rick Hillier, and the rest of the Valor in the Presence of the Enemy group are looking to have their awards reviewed. You read Francis Pegahmagabow's military medal citation from the Battle of the Scarp, and you put it into context of where he was and what he did. And, he did this with a hernia and having just got back into the trench from pneumonia. It's incredible that he wasn't awarded the Victoria Cross. His first military medal was actually downgraded from the Distinguished Service Medal. And then you kind of look at the rest of his story, and was there jealousy? Was there systemic racism, and why he didn't get those medals? It's a further part of that story.
Yeah, and the hard part is that the wording is the critical part of it all, which is the kind of sad. But Pat, you got any thoughts on any of this?
The Victoria Cross, it's held as that that top tier kind of like award of heroism. It's interesting because and we've had some modern. I don't know what it is about. We're in a society. I'm just gonna go on a tangent for a moment. We're in a society of we're just gonna hand out all these participation medals, and then you hear of these incredible acts of heroism. When we're talking about war, and somebody doesn't get a Victoria Cross. We have a Canadian example, but we also have that one Gurkha. He's literally beating Taliban off with a tripod at the end of the battle, and and again, was that some systemic racism? Was it because he's the Gurkha? What is going on there? I feel that he should have had a higher award for what he did, and which I find is just ironic in a world today that again, we give out the term out so easily as participation medals for everyone. Yeah, and another point that I wanted to make too, it was kind of floating around in my head is, man, wouldn't it be interesting to find out more of some of these people, their upbringing? I would love to know their upbringing. What molded them to be that person? I find that a very interesting thing because maybe it was something just within their personality, but what more was inside them, or how were they produced as a human? If that makes sense?
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by this as well, and I think a lot of it has to do with preparation for the moment as best you can, and then because there are situations where heroic acts ended very quickly, right? Like that one platoon leader that's gonna rally the troops together, and we're gonna, yeah, boys, let's go, done, and he's over. And then somebody else steps up and he makes it, and then he's the hero, right? So it's there's a portion of luck to it, I believe, as well, just being in the right position at the right time with the skills, and then doing the thing and making it out sometimes not. That's the other part of it too. Lots of these awards are done posthumously as well. So Shaun, you got any thoughts on the award itself?
Well, I don't know all of the awards, and I don't know all of the critical wording for each award, but for the Victoria Cross, I've always used my own loose language, and it's simply this, that it's an individual who's willing to self-sacrifice themselves to create a positive outcome and not care so much about their life, but care about the lives of others. And so, in essence, you're giving yourself away to save others. Now, whether you make it through the moment or not, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the moment that you step over that trench, or you jump out of that vehicle, or you say, "Follow me, men." Like, that's you kind of giving away almost your, not personal agency, but to some degree your extended life, perhaps your future, in order to save those around you, in order to do the right thing, and not be so concerned about your own life, just mostly concerned about others. That's how I think of it. It's almost like a self-sacrificial moment that you may or may not survive. Of course, in the face of the enemy. And so that's how I've always thought of it. It's loose language. But you know what is interesting? My language isn't correct when it comes to the Victoria Cross, but there is precise language. But because of that precise language, I feel like nowadays we're in this pedantic phase where if you met the conditions for every single sentence, except for the third word in the last sentence, you don't get it. And so this pedanticism of the rules and regulations of what a hero is, I think it's holding back some good people from being properly recognized because of the pedanticness of the moment. And why is that? Why are we being so pedantic? Why are we holding back a medal from someone who is now dead? Why are we doing that? What is it? Is it just such a reluctance to consider that every life that was sacrificed to save others has to fit into this tiny little defined box called 4 lines that you've got to meet every single word? It doesn't work for me, man. Like, heroism isn't a pedantic moment. Heroism isn't a construct that can fit into a definition. Pat said it at the start. We're all struggling to figure out what a hero is. You can look it up in Webster's dictionary and you'll get a version, but that version is just one of a million versions that could apply to a million people explaining what heroism is. And so now we're deferring to the pedantic definition ascribed on, at a national level in some, we'll call it a rule book. And that just doesn't work for me, man. Because again, heroism isn't a pedantic moment.
That's a good point. Jason, what do you got?
If I could just jump in here, in the case of Jess La Rochelle with the push to get his reward reviewed, unfortunately he passed away before it could be done. But Dr. David O'Keefe, he is a military historian in Canada. He's run multiple shows on History Channel and CBC and so on. He has the quote here that is really applicable to what Shaun just said. Jess not getting the VC is like the Hockey Hall of Fame not letting one in unless they are better than Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, that I think I wanted to play with this a little bit and push back just a touch on this. Is that, Shaun, you're a big standards guy, right? Standards are the standards. This is the line. It shall not. It does not come down, but it does for some reason. It feels like, especially for our awards here in Canada, the criteria just keeps climbing and it just keeps getting harder and harder and harder. I think so. Like precise language, I'm good with precise language, but at the same time, when you have people that don't understand what that means, I think that's the crucial part of it. Shaun, what do you got?
I agree, Chance. You're right to throw that in there. The standard is the standard. But the standard, as I see it, within the pedantic definition of what you're required to do to get a Victoria Cross, is not carved on a tablet. Like, I mean, it's a standard, but standards, once they're achieved, and any hero that is achieving Victoria Cross level consideration, the very fact that you're being considered for the award should almost automatically give you the award. Because if you're being considered, it means you did it. Now we're applying the pedanticism of it. And, okay, did we run out of metal? Can we not make any more medals? No. We could have 1 million Victoria Crosses by the end of the month. But then, of course, that would dilute the value of the medal. And so it's not for lack of being able to present someone the medal. I feel like now it's being held at such rarefied air that just casually tossing it out like Skittles, of course, dilutes the memorableness of it. And so, is it just that the standard has been set to such an exclusive level that we're fearful as a nation to dilute the importance of this heroic object? That's what I'm asking you guys.
That's an interesting question. I was thinking something very similar, but I think it's not so much the fear of dilution. I think it's the fear of being the person to give it up, because it's never been awarded in Canada. So to be the first person to give a VC, I think they're thinking beyond that of like, well, what if it's not technically a VC? And then they start to fear about the consequences of letting it go too soon, like just gatekeeping for their own sake. I think at least that's where I'm coming from. Jason, what do you got?
Yeah, I think there's a fear from DND and from the government of Canada, because it will be such a big deal to actually do, because it hasn't been awarded in decades. I don't think we've had one since maybe Korea. And since Canada adopted its own Victoria Cross in early 2000s, I believe, maybe late 90s. I'm sorry, 93. Thank you. No one's been awarded it. And you look at these citations from Afghanistan, and every other nation that was there has given out their top award for gallantry in the presence of the enemy, and Canada hasn't. And despite the fact that we do have so many cases, especially the case of Jess La Rochelle, I mean, it's an absolute no-brainer if you read his story. I think there is fear on the part of the government and the military to get it so perfectly right that it can't be questioned, that they've now become stagnant with bureaucracy effectively, and that's why it hasn't happened.
It bugs me. Pat, what do you think?
I don't know. I'm trying not to be completely popping off about all this. It's because there's like a part of me that believes that there's a level of spiteism, if you will, in it. You know what I mean? Because like, who's giving this award, right? Was it someone that was actually in the trenches? Was it actually somebody that has seen action? Is it actually somebody that has actually been amongst the men who have been there? Or is it just some dude in a suit sitting in an office that goes, oh, well, I'll decide, you know? So I'm really trying to avoid being bitter on this. And another part of me also thinks, and this is just from what's bubbling up inside, we don't want to admit that Afghanistan was a real war. You know what I mean? Like, as a nation, as a society, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, well, no, it was, and we see it on Remembrance Day every year. Like, it's almost like Afghanistan is like, it's like the most recent conflict. But it's like, well, we talk about World War I and World War II and Korea, and then it's like all of a sudden it's like this like blank, it's like dial tone. You know what I mean? It's like, what? So, and that's just what I've been observing, and that's where I'm trying to like keep
Keep it
myself under control here.
I find it funny. It does feel that way sometimes. You go to the larger Remembrance Day ceremonies, and they say, let's take a moment to remember our war dead from World War I, World War II, and Korea, and Afghanistan. And there's kind of like a delay there. I'm just like, oh, and by the way, we forgot about it. And there was a push. I remember when I was actually overseas, that kept saying that we weren't in war. It was a state of armed conflict. And then they had to eventually, I think it was 2009, they opened up the war diaries, and which then once the diaries were open, then the VC could technically be awarded because we were at war, but we never had an official state of war. This is what I was hearing. Jason, what do you got?
That just goes back to the stifling bureaucracy and outright stupidity of the definitions. All the things that we were talking about there. I mean, clearly the nation was at war. 2006, 2007 were some of the heaviest years in Afghanistan for losses. 158 men and women lost their life there. And most of that between 2002 and 2009 probably is where the vast majority of those losses came. And say, well, we've already lost 150 people, so now we'll call it a war. It's just nonsense, and there's no other way to put it.
Yeah, it really is. So on that note, let's shift gears a little bit.
Well, hang on a sec. Before we shift gears, there is another piece to this. And, I don't want to make it personal, but I will relay a personal story in order to set the stage for what I want to build out. And so we're talking about the Afghanistan war, where, obviously there was some heroism going on, and some undervalued heroism, we'll call it, where that individual is either not getting a nod or the recognition that they duly deserve. And so, but you didn't have to go to Afghanistan to be a hero. Like there's people in Canada that are currently serving that have done heroic acts, and they're also not getting recognized. But you know who's the worst at gatekeeping? Us. Not the government. We are. As veterans or as serving members, we are the worst. And it's because, maybe through our own pride or whatever the case is, we don't want to give that individual a nod because we didn't get a chance at it. And so I believe veterans are as bad as the government when it comes to giving due recognition. And now I said I'll make it a bit of a personal case. I remember when I first jumped on social media, some dude got all up in my grill, in my comments about, what do you know? You never served in Afghanistan. Hey? You know what I'm saying? Like, we are our own cage of rattlesnakes, all biting each other. And so, what is it about humans that we try to hold back the deserved recognition because we feel we got robbed of the moment,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's you've hit it on the head. Like that is like one of the most ugliest things about our human existence, and one thing that people are not mindful of. And you're spot on that. We can be our worst enemy. And like when I was talking about like the gatekeepers, like that, and I'm not throwing officers under the bus here, but like that, like a lot of times it's those guys hanging out at NDHQ who are like, I'm a soldier, but I push a pen in this office and I will decide who gets what. I just don't get why. You're right, veterans are the worst. And uh, there was a part of the human dynamic that like is, yeah, like I didn't get mine. That's so bad. Why are we like that? Even as humans as a whole, but like it's like, dude, what? And oh, that's what I wanted to point out. You said something very interesting just a second ago. Heroic acts. Does a heroic act make you a hero? Right? Like that was because you've done a heroic act. Do you obtain that level of heroism?
Yeah, see, and that's where I wanted to go with this too, is that a heroic act doesn't make you a hero. It's the rest of the people, like if the people see it, that put you as a hero. And it's funny, Shaun, you mentioned it, and as well, Pat. When if someone were to call you a hero, you'd be like, no. No. And yet the acts in which, from their point of view, are heroic, for like when they look at you and say, man, like, of course, yeah, you're a hero. But that's from their context. They just don't have the larger context, because a lot of times, like, we don't hear about these people. And one of the people, you mentioned him earlier, Pat, Tommy Prince, member of the 1st Special Service Force, the Devil's Brigade, conducted solo missions behind enemy lines while under fire, awarded the military medal and the U.S. Silver Star, which they don't give those out very lightly. Served again after World War II in Korea, and one of the most decorated Indigenous veterans across the board. And like, I'm sure you guys have some stories. Pat, you want to relay a couple from battle school back in the day?
Well, I mean, we heard all kinds of legends, and of course, that was like kind of like the mandatory things was regimental history, and Tommy Prince was one of those guys, and yeah, just learning about how hardcore of a soldier he was just super impressive. His tracking ability, and like doing those solo missions and using his Indigenous upbringing and skills to complement his soldier, like it's just awesome. And the reconnaissances that he did, I mean, I don't know about the scalping if that's true, but even if as a young soldier you're like, that's pretty bad, you know what I mean? So yeah, so and then it was it super sucks, like, but it also impressive. Like, he did World War II and then he goes straight back to Korea. Like, I thought that was awesome, and the way he was treated afterward, though, that sucked. That's not as cool. But I'm glad that they are trying to honor him in a lot of ways. You know, like the Tommy Prince platoon, and you know, the parade squares and the drill halls all named after him. And I wish there was more. Even the stamps. I purposely bought the stamps just because he was on the stamp.
I did as well. I did, absolutely. Jason, you got any thoughts on Tommy?
Yeah, absolute legend, Manitoba. Obviously I wasn't Army, but up to speed on the First Special Service Force is one of the main drivers of the stuff that I do. They were kind of just unsung heroes as they were as a founding member of what special warfare is today. And I was actually just trying to find. There's a great quote out there somewhere of one of his fellow troops recounting his actions, and he is responsible in large part, or as Minerva's group, for why they were called the Black Devils. He would do these solo missions at night. He would get rid of his boots, go completely minimal, literally tape everything else to his body so he didn't make a sound, adopt his traditional, I believe it's Ojibwe footwear, and sneak behind enemy lines right into the barracks. Nobody knew how he got past the sentries. He would get into their barracks where they're sleeping, tie their shoes together, remove a boot, or just leave their sticker, their calling card, to the point where they thought he was a ghost. They were the Black Devils. They painted all their faces black, and then once in a while he would kill one of them silently in the middle of the room and leave him there for everybody else to find. I mean, he was a walking propaganda warrior. He was incredible man.
Yeah, some of the stories are just ridiculous, and it's kind of interesting because, again, a lot of times people just don't know about this stuff. I mean, if you have any interest in Canadian military history, which I think a lot of us did when we were growing up, we wanted to be in the Army. It sounded cool. You start doing research, and you're like, whoa, these people and these stories and these, and there was one story at one point where he did a raid by himself, went into one of the camps, slit the throat of somebody sleeping next to somebody else, and then disappeared. And then, like, you wake up with a dude dead next to you, and you're like, that's gonna freak out some people. Definite psychological warfare. Shaun, you got any thoughts on Tommy?
I do. So, like Pat, first time I saw Tommy, well, I don't know if it's the first time Pat saw Tommy Prince at battle school, but that's the first time I saw him was at battle school, Camp Wainwright, where I spent 6 months. And you can freaking guarantee that our senior NCOs, as we were standing there as still wet behind the ears raw recruits, were letting us know what Tommy Prince was all about. There's a big photo of him up on the wall. And once I heard a little bit about his history, here's what I used to do every single time I saw that photo. I'd look him straight in the eyes and think, I want to be that guy. And so you need heroes, man. You do. We all need heroes. My day 1 in battle school, or day 3 or whatever it was when I first saw that photo, here's what my little young Shaun brain thought. Because I'd just come out of Grand Cache, Pat. And, I spent most of my life in Grand Cache hunting nearly every day. And nearly always solo. I just take my Ruger 1022, go out there, and Pat knows what it's like in wintertime. I just squat down in a snowbank and watch for an hour or two until I saw my rabbit or whatever I did. I was tracking and hunting and, doing all of the things. And that was my life as a kid growing up in Grand Cache. I loved it. I was handy in the bush. Then when I got to battle school and saw Tommy Prince, I was like, hang on a sec. We've got similar backgrounds, loosely. And maybe if he can do it, I can. That's what I started telling myself. If that hero can do it, maybe I can. Doesn't mean that I'm going to be a hero. It just means that someone is out there kicking that ass. And I want to follow in his footprints. And so these kind of hero moments are important to all of us. Tommy Prince literally set the first phases of my military career. Me wanting to be him. Me wanting to be recon, me wanting to be way out front of everyone else by myself, in my socks, stalking people. That's no lie. That's what I wanted. And so, we need heroes, for sure. But not just heroes on a wall as a photo, because at the time, I didn't know that Tommy was, First Special Service Force. It may have been referenced loosely in a quick sentence by one of the instructors, but never got built out into something that I knew was like, it's this unit, and the unit did this and blah blah blah. I never heard about 1st Special Service Force until much later in my military career. And so these hero stories can inspire Canadians for sure. But the story itself has to be told in a way that it really sinks into a person. I shouldn't have had to in that moment, and I'm not laying the blame at anyone's feet. All I'm saying is I don't think I should have had to find out what this hero was all about over the course of several years. It should have been like a hardcore briefing where I sat down and had my eyes bugged out and thought, oh, I definitely want to be that guy now, rather than the trickle feed that I kind of got over a period of years. So, I hope that makes sense in respect to Tommy and how he influenced me in my military career, my whole military career. But I sure as heck would have liked a little bit more data at the front end. That's for sure.
Yeah. So let's dive into this a little bit then. How do we do this better? Because as you said, veterans were the worst at it to begin with. It's like the government's even worse, or not quite even worse than us, but the next step down. And, we as Canadians are a little bit self-deprecating anyway, so we don't talk about it more. But how do we as a society, as a group of dudes, as veterans, how do we tell these stories in a way that isn't, beating someone's head in saying like, you need to know this. But at the same time, pass on these stories so that people can be inspired. Like that's what heroes really do, is they inspire us to greater things. So how do we do it better? Jason, I'm going to start with you. What do you got?
It really comes down to everyone within the Canadian Forces just taking pride in what they do and where they are and what they're doing. To me, I went in the Air Force, I went to units or squadrons that were involved in World War II night fighting or bombing raids, etc. And you see the pictures on the wall and the mess, and you're kind of like, oh, that's the past history of the squadron. But to me, if it was my unit, I would take just one day of your in-dock phase of everybody that's coming in whatever wave, or even do it as like an annual briefing of just, here is the heraldry of the unit that you are now with. I mean, these are your kin, your forefathers, essentially, that served here. Here's what this unit did, and you are now carrying on the tradition and pride of these accomplishments every day that you wear that unit, squadron, whatever crest on your shoulder. Take pride in it, and carry that pride forward. Share it with others, and that's just a great place to start, in my opinion.
Yeah, I remember walking through CFSME, the engineer school in Gagetown, and we had busts of former VC winners that were engineers. We had stories of engineering history and what the Canadian engineers have done and so on and so forth. But we were never like walked around and told, oh, this is who this is. That was part of the in-dock training of like, you needed to see the list of names of like, yep, these were VC winners, and you kind of had to memorize it, but there was no like storytelling involved. The only piece of that we got, and this was a really good thing, our squadrons get named after during training, after points in time, right? So like I was Doha troop, which means I had to study what happened at Doha with the Canadian engineers in 91. And I'm similar with you guys, imagine in battle school or through your training, that's a good way to do it, but it only talks about one particular thing. So it's a little tricky on making sure everyone knows, but possible. Pat, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, Mount Sorrel. Anyways, I'm sure Shaun knows his battle school name as well. But yeah, no, it's interesting because yeah, I don't know how we're in the day and age of social media and vlogging like every moment of our existence, and we can't seem to like properly house um, the data and the experiences of our modern military. It's great, and I think it's super important to have that the legacy and to know who came before us and who and what titans we stand on the shoulders of. That's super important. But as a modern time, I don't know why we're failing in a sense of capturing some of these true heroes and putting out the data or the book or the movie or whatever we need to do to reflect that. I know personally, like every time there's a sticker that you get from the kit shop, the PPCLI kit shop, and it's just our colors with our battle honors on it. And there's many times where like that's sat in front of me, and I'm kind of looking at all the battles, and I'm going, wow, that's it's a lot of history there, you know. And I think we're failing in some ways. Like if you can vlog literally every second of our lives, and we can't seem to like even name, we'll say 10 guys from like the last, we'll go all the way back to like from the 80s to now, of heroic acts or battles or anything. I think we're kind of failing, because I know that they're we've had them.
Yeah, I mean, there's the Medak Pocket, like that massive battle. No one knows about it. I mean, the troops were sworn to secrecy when they got back and told not to talk about it. So this is another friggin' issue with us as Canadians. But Shaun, you got any thoughts?
It's a wild thought, boys. It's a wild thought, and I'm not going to drag us down this tangent because it won't serve as well. But I do want to throw this out because it bubbled up into my brain, and that is Friesenberg versus Passchendaele. Like right from day one in battle school, it's our platoon versus their platoon. Like we're competing already on day one. We are competing. We're almost like already divided in a way. Now I know we're all part of the same team, but it's us versus them, our sister platoon, as it were. We want to beat them, they want to beat us, and we're at odds almost. And I think maybe in an early stage of our military careers, we're like not trying to get one up on the other dude, but we're trying to win. And if we're not winning, then maybe that other person shouldn't win. Do you see what I'm saying? So maybe from early on, and I know it's a wild idea, but we're indoctrinated to some degree to, if I can't have it, they can't have it.
Pitted against each other from the very beginning. That's an interesting thought. I like it. I'm going to pass it around. I'm going to pass it around. Jason, what do you got?
It could certainly be used as motivation. We had the exact same thing with all the different flights through our different phases of flight training. You got to be better. You got to be better than B flight. You got to be better than A flight. I was Cobra flight, and like I'll be damned if you're within your course serial. Everybody that was in that flight wasn't better than those other two. It breeds a healthy competition, but I guess it can go too far where you kind of just end up being segregated in a negative way, but at least it's a way to start a conversation in terms of what you were discussing there, Shaun, in terms of the names of the units. It immediately evokes thoughts like, okay, well, why is this unit named this way? And I think that's a good thing, actually.
So this brings up an interesting thought. I just sat down. I sat my boys down and we watched The Devil's Brigade, the old one, and like one of my absolute favorite movies. But in that movie, it's a great little segue here. As they were creating the first Special Service Force, it shows the difference, the Canadians versus the Americans, and it was very much one versus the other. We're going to be better than these guys. And the whole point of the unit was to be a unit, not two separate units. So it makes a lot of sense because, well, I mean, at least in the movie, and I'm sure in real life, they had to bridge that gap. They had to get people on the same team. And perhaps that is the way through these things, right? Rather than separating or fighting against each other. I mean, you could compete for one thing rather than two, but yeah, we can't solve all the problems of the universe here and today. You guys got any thoughts before I got?
Just a funny thought, though. And it's not that I'm in a funny thought mood. These things are just bubbling up. I'm just throwing them out for ideas and see where the conversation goes. But thinking about The Devil's Brigade, the movie, the pivotal moment in that movie when those two units, those two sides, those two countries, those two teams, when they finally bonded, as I see it, it occurred in the mess hall when the Canadian sergeant took his little round wire glasses off, put them down, and the fight was on. And it's because he was an unarmed combat instructor and he's a pretty hard dude, and he took care of that business. But the way he did it was what drew those units together. Just in the movie. I mean, I'm not talking about real life. Obviously, the drawing together of two elements is much more of a longer burn. But in the movie, they make it a flashpoint, a fast burn to draw the two elements together. And it was just, as I see it, it was just one dude with his wire glasses, taking them off politely and then putting those two units together. And that came together through violence, by the way. And it wasn't big violence. It wasn't like stabbing anyone in the neck or anything like that. It was just enough tension that when the dust settled, everyone shook hands, and now they're part of the same team. You know what I'm saying?
I dig it. Jason, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, that's just forming bond through adversity and hardship. And I think that it really goes to everyone who serves in a way. I mean, I've got friends from, as silly as it sounds, from basic training. You know, you go through your silly little section attacks and being weaned off food, and you create those memories and those bonds with those people. What do they call it? Trauma bonding, even though basic training is not that. But it relates to what Sean's talking about, and you form friendships for life from that kind of stuff because you have such a unique shared experience, and I think that's exactly what happened there.
Yeah, I'm wondering also is like perhaps the negative side of this is that it becomes exclusive, right? Is that once there's an exclusivity of it, and similar to what we were talking about with the medals earlier, because there's an exclusivity to it, well, if somebody else can have it, I don't want it. And it goes back to this, that's the same thing. It does create a team, a unit, but if you're not in that unit, then you're on the out. And if they do cool things and you're on the out, it's hard to then look at them and say, oh, these guys are doing great. So I love this. Pat, you got any thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, like at what point do we make our soldiers like do Zen meditation or something? I don't know, because I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's people that get this envy and this one against the other type mentality. I don't think I really ever suffered from it. I mean, to an extent, I guess I have. I mean, part of that could be esprit de corps or camaraderie, but like when Shaun was talking about the two different platoons, as soon as we're in battle school, no one gives an F about what your platoon name was. Now you're in battalion. Now you're part of a larger whole. It doesn't matter if you came in 2 weeks ago or there was the next group that came in 4 weeks after you. Because I mean, for me personally, I went straight into workup for Bosnia, straight out of battle school. So no one cared. No one cared about battle school was over. If you talked about battle school and battalion, you probably either got laughed at or beat up because you're probably opening your mouth at the wrong time. And so like now, it comes down to a human aspect. It's like, are we like failing again? I guess, like, why do we have envy? Why do we have this envious bone in us when it comes to some of this stuff? I find it hard to understand.
Yeah. I also we went directly into workup for Afghanistan when I got out of my unit, or got out of my threes. And yeah, you didn't talk about your 3 scores. No one cared. And I think that's what initially the first thing everyone said was when we first showed up to the regiment, everyone was like, okay, you guys are done your 3s. You don't need to talk about them. We've all been there. Keep your mouth shut. Go down to the bay. But it's part of it. Okay, so I want to talk about another one. We're going to move down the list here. I got Léo Major. Have you guys all heard of Léo Major? Yeah, no? Léo Major. So he lost an eye in France, took a round in the eye, lost it, refused to be sent home, single-handedly liberated the Dutch city of Zwolle in 1945, captured 93 Germans alone on D-Day, awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal, one of only 3 Canadians ever to earn it. He then went back in Korea and helped secure Hill 355, which is another large battle. Now, the funny thing is, one of the stories I heard was that he was going to be awarded the VC, and then it was General Montgomery that was supposed to give it to him, and he turned it down because he absolutely hated him. He would not accept the award from him, and yeah, it was just another great thing. So any thoughts, Jason? What do you know on Léo?
I know Leo's story, and I know Leo's story is somewhat discussed in terms of the validity of all those different events in the Taudos role. Capturing 93 men single-handedly and then walking them down through, I believe it was 100, and then an SS house full of SS opened up on the troops because they were surrendering and killed a bunch.
Yeah.
It's when there's only one witness to the history, you're kind of like, we get into that discussion we had earlier of how much was this grandstanding, how much of it was real. Um, Incredible story regardless. I'm taking nothing away from the gallantry of the guy, especially with the actions he performed in Korea. I believe he stormed Juno Beach on D-Day and lost the eye there, refused to get back. He called himself a pirate, and off he went. But to volunteer for a recce mission in a town that you believe to be heavily fortified with Germans, with just you and one man, the other man gets killed, and you proceed. I mean, hard as nails to continue regardless. And the guy is, deserving of the title of a Canadian hero for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Shaun, you got any thoughts on Léo?
Just this, that as Jason said, hard as nails. I always want to be around a dude who's as hard as a railway spike. I do. And whether it's in war or peace, I just want to be around a dude that is larger than life, is a hero waiting to happen. And whether he ever becomes a hero or not is neither here nor there to me. I just love being around people who are so freaking legit. It embarrasses me, So what do I think of that story? Here was my first thought. I wish I could have been next to him. I wish I could have been there to see it. I wish I could have witnessed it. I wish I could have felt it. I wish I could have just had the presence to soak it all in and better understand what it means to be a hero,
Yeah. Pat, you got any thoughts?
Not much. I mean, it's the first I've heard of him, and I mean, of course, it sounds amazing, and I love that it was documented. And not to take this into uh, my own personal story or whatever like that, but it was like you hear some of these stories, and it is mind blowing. Like I love hearing them for the first time. It's like when watched Bridge Too Far, which I'm sure most of us have. I watched that movie a few times, and it was my dad told he's like, yeah, your Oppo was there. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, he was 16 years old. He was Dutch resistance. And he was the one that literally told the generals, do not go into that town. It is heavily fortified with Germans. We've been through it. We know it. We've been operating in that area. And they still sent them in. And it was because he was 16 years old. The British officers were like, whatever. But to hear the stories and then hear more of what my Oppa did in the war just blew my mind, because you never know. He was just a rad dude. This is the guy that walked 10K all the way into his 80s, made sure he drank distilled water, and was always like the calmest, coolest dude in the room. And then you find out, like, oh, okay, there's a reason, there's a pedigree here. So I always love to know. I would love to know more about before and after some of these heroic acts of these humans.
Yeah, and and the fun part for me is when I read the histories and I start looking at what these people did and where they came from. It makes perfect sense, right? When you learn someone's history and then they get into these positions and then they do these heroic things, and you look at them in hindsight and you're like, oh, well, yeah, of course, this set them up for this. Like the fact that Tommy was became a scout and he had all these skill sets to be in that position. Well, yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. But to think of it in the time, also, it's not always front of mind. But in hindsight, it all seems to make sense. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
No, I think you nailed it. I mean, hindsight is 20/20, as they say, and Pat now he's thinking about that 16-year-old and how the 80-year-old makes sense, but only through the lens of looking back several decades in that individual's life and realizing 2 + 2 = 4. Until you hear the story, you don't know the story at all. And then once you hear the story, then you sit down and you look backwards and make sense of the story. That's it. The story doesn't make any sense and isn't worth the bucket that you drop the story into unless you take time to really, really think, does this make sense? How did this happen? Now I see how it happened. Yes, it makes sense. And okay, now I understand. But until then, they're just stories like the billion other stories you'll hear in your life. So if you ever get to meet a hero and hear a heroic story, it'll just be another freaking boring billion story that you've heard throughout the rest of your life because you never paid attention. Stories are all around us. They're going this way and that way, and we get so used to hearing them that like it turns into white noise. And then you start living your life like a white noise story. All of a sudden the hero stories don't even register. It's just another boring story out of the billion boring stories that you heard. You got to take the moment to like always reflect back on how did this happen? And now it makes sense. And now I understand why he's a hero.
So I have a thought on this then. I want to play with this idea of heroic context, let's put it that way, in that there are things that are absolutely heroic. I mean, we look at Leo's story, we look at Tommy's story, we look at Francis' story. Those things are really heroic, but they are also in very heroic circumstances, as we've been saying. Like war is because the consequences are so high for anything, the level at which you're going to see heroism is going to be more increased, I think, because the situation is so dire. But what about, you mentioned Terry Fox earlier, Shaun, like what about the people that are really living heroic lives or doing heroic things, but they're not being recognized? Where do we see a line between like the context of Terry Fox versus Tommy Prince? Like it's two, you can't really compare the two, but you can call them both heroes. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on that dividing line. Jason, what do you got?
It's an interesting question, and I think it all comes down to context and what their actions mean to the person that it affected to make them label that person a hero. A hero to a mother who, their kid is locked in the child seat of a car swept away in a river, and a first responder manages to save them. I mean, that guy's a hero, absolutely. There's different levels to it. And I think it's really just recognizing, going above and beyond what you're expected to do in that situation to a certain degree, that garners that label. But yeah, it's a bit of a juxtaposition of how do you define it. It's up for discussion. Yeah.
The expectation, that's a good word to use. I like that. Pat, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, like it's such a great topic, and it's really opening my mind. I'll be thinking about this for the rest of the day. The whole label of hero is very interesting, and it is obviously a lot of times can be very personal, as you know, it may affect you personally. Like you think of a firefighter or a first responder, those type of things. Going back to Terry Fox, is he a hero in my mind? No. Is he a legend? Is he noble? Is he, like, did he do something that was far and beyond? But like, I mean, did he save anyone from Canada? I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I'm not trying to make myself enemy number one of Canada, but did he save anybody's life? Did he, did he do anything other than, like, I'm going to run across Canada, like, for awareness? That's great, noble, super honorable. Does he make him a hero in my eyes? I don't know if he makes the cut for me, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I do know this, I don't know the actual numbers of this, but based off of the Terry Fox run, they have made so much more progress in cancer research based on the monies that are raised for it every year that would not be attributed to anything other than that money grants for those research projects. So he actually has saved a lot of lives, but it's secondary, right? Like it's through the run, through the things that have then created something else. And yeah, I think that's part of it. Even the
well, then, like, I mean, based on that, and I'm not trying to cut you off, but then we should just label Satch as a hero now, for running for mental health.
That's a good
You know what I
point.
mean? Or is he a very noble man? That's doing a very honorable thing. You know what I mean? And then again, this is just a philosophy to be knocked around. And I'm not trying to make myself an enemy of anyone here, but
just jumping in here, screw Terry Fox.
Hey, listen. Thank you, Pat. Thank you for not, like, either you didn't think that through fully or you did. Either way, you're kind of a little bit of a hero right now for even raising that idea, because I think you're kind of right. It's not that I'm miscategorizing Terry Fox as a hero. That's up for debate, depending on what your definition is of a hero. And as Pat threw out, like, a challenging statement, of course, but I do appreciate it. I am rethinking that idea because by my own definition, maybe Terry doesn't fit into that rarefied air of being a Canadian hero. Maybe he's a Canadian legend. But then it's the pedantics of the moment. And so are you a hero or are you a legend or are you both or are you neither? And so the truth of the matter, I suppose, is in the eye of the beholder. And so if you ask me today, now, versus an hour ago, maybe I've got two different terms for him. Maybe he's just a legend. Just a legend. And isn't that the devil in the details? Isn't it? Because we've been talking about it through the entire podcast. Just. The is he really? You know, we're so critical. And so it's nice that we're dialing into the definition, but I do want to caution myself or anyone who's listening right now. We're not beating up on anyone, and we're not raising anyone to a fresh level. We're just talking about history and our opinions, and through our opinions and our ideas and our conversation that's flowing back and forth, I'm sure that between the four of us, we'll come away from this conversation with our own personal definitions being malleable enough that they are now a bit different. And that's what you should be getting right now from this conversation as a listener. Or if you think about this later, you should be having these kind of conversations with your neighbor across the fence, or, you know, when you're driving to work with your buddy. These are the kind of topics that should happen so that as a country, as a nation, we can have a better sense of what a legend is, what a hero is. Can you be a legendary hero? What is epic? What isn't? These things don't get talked about. And I think it's probably because I've been perhaps careless enough to simply think of Terry as a hero. But maybe he just doesn't fit properly into that total definition of heroism. Maybe it's just legendary. Just.
But we should fully honor him. Like there should be a huge amount of honor put towards that man for what he did and everything that he's accomplished. But yeah, I guess I'm not trying to be the gatekeeper. It's just the gatekeeper in my own mind on what that level is.
Jason, what do you think?
I think it's very dependent on the context of the action in relation to who is calling that individual a hero, and then the framing of what that person is in, say, the situation. Just going back on my, first responder saving somebody, to that mother, he's a hero. To somebody else, he's just framed as someone doing his job, and it's not the same level as somebody who's, done extraordinary things in war, under fire, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a very fluid definition, and the context matters to different perspectives on it.
So I want to get your perspective on this, because with this, the reason we got this started is you're doing a film on Francis, right? You're putting together a research project to build this out. And I want to know how your concepts have shifted over since you've started this to now, and you're developing this thing. How's it affected you?
It's so I'll start. I have a ton more research to do. This is going to change immensely over the next few years as I do it. So I've got a loose framework in how I want the script to go, and I'm doing this to go back to what we were just talking about. We're referencing, the Devil's Brigade movie and A Bridge Too Far, etc. These movies give modern context to people who weren't there to understand in a more visual way, to understand what happened in history. And so it's a very, very layered story. And I don't want to make it seem like a war propaganda film, and at the same time not paint Francis as a victim at the same time, even though he was. It's very contextual there with, dealing with the government. And so, and that will continue to shift as I do more research, understand more about where he came from, more about the individual battles he was in. I plan to visit every single battle site in Europe, to see them firsthand and understand the lay of the land and put it all in context. And we'll see where it takes me, but it's been a fun start.
I dig it. Shaun,
Well,
what do you got?
that's actually a perfect segue into how to define a hero. It's nuanced. It's a granular pursuit of history over a period of time so that you as an individual can categorize it as such or not. And so I do believe that it is a personal, not opinion, but it's a personal journey of what is a hero. Takes time and consideration and nuance to over years perhaps redefine what a hero is in your own mind, as Pat did today. Maybe I'm not suggesting 2 weeks from now he'll regret what he said, because I like what he said and I'm standing behind it, but I'll bet that he's going to feel it later today when we jump off of this podcast, and that will help refine his opinion. That will be granularity and nuance as he sweats the details later tonight, as he has a restless sleep because maybe he wishes he said more or had said less or whatever the case is. I love that, man, because the very fact of speaking openly about these things helps us clarify our own personal definitions.
So I think this is something that clicked in my head just a second ago. Have you guys all seen the Canadian heritage moments? You know, with especially the Halifax explosion one. That we were, my boys and I were sitting in a doctor's office the other day, and on one of the TVs was that exact heritage moment, and I looked up at it. And I was like, "Ha, the Halifax explosion! Like I've seen this millions of times," and I was like, "Boys, have you seen this one before?" And they were like, "Seen what? What?" And they looked up and they watched it and they're like, "No, I've no idea what the Halifax explosion is." And I was like, "Wait a second. How do you not know what this is?" Okay, I've obviously neglected to tell you. You've not learned about it in school. And I gave them a quick little rundown. But those Canada heritage moments, I mean, we all grew up on those. We watched them on TV. They were always in there, and they always had these little tidbits about heroes and so on and so forth. But that shaped our concept of what a hero is, right? As you hear about Terry Fox every year at school. That's what a hero is. You go to Remembrance Day ceremonies. These are what heroes are. But we never actually develop our own concept of what a hero is. And I think that's what we're talking about. Like, Jason, you're going to be developing a concept of a hero in your own mind. You're going to develop it at great nuance and go to the locations and see the things for your own eyes and understand for you what that is. And then you're going to try to pass that on to everybody else so they can better understand theirs. But I think the average person, they have no desire to do that because they've never met or spoken to directly who somebody they would consider a hero, right? That's why I think we celebrate sports stars and friggin' celebrities and so on and so forth. It's just because they have no context, none whatsoever. Whereas somebody that's been in the military or been through first responders, stuff like that, there's direct examples that you can like point to, you can touch and be like, I know that guy. They did these things. It's unreal because I have a general knowledge, I have a general context of what they went through, and you don't. So trying to pass that context on is almost, I think that's going to be the greatest challenge. Shaun, what do you got?
So you're right. And, for our generation, because we're older, we came up on those Canadian heritage moments. They served the country well in like the 70s, man. I mean, they're almost an anachronism now. When you look at those things, they're almost a study in how conversations were in the 70s and 80s. They're a historical piece talking about history. We actually, as a country, don't have a lot of modern representation of these kind of heroic stories. And I think it is critical that individuals like Jason or Gordo from All the Way, Gordo, as an example, who's been on the podcast, Special Operations, and he's currently driving towards putting out a documentary specific to CANSOFCOM operations, we'll call it, where he is trying to tell a story about modern history, Canadians that are currently alive as heroes, we'll call it. And he's trying to dovetail it into how to not only tell the story, but how veterans as a whole actually need help because of these modern history moments. And so his documentary, when it shows up, will be a modern retelling of what heroes are or what adversity is or what these various terms that we're trying to define. Gordo will do not his spin on it, but he will relay it in a way that feels authentic to him and everyone around him, nodding their heads and saying that's righteous, and now that is going to become part of Canadian history when it drops, just like Jason's is. But Jason ain't going to do it in a siloized, no one talking to him way. He's going to recruit his friends for their opinions and for their advice and for their mentorship or guidance or whatever the case is. It won't be just Jason in his own tiny little echo chamber mind telling a story. And so I kind of think that's what almost podcasting is in a way. We're all trying to tell a righteous story about this moment right now, Canadian heroes, but we've got to do it almost as a group setting, as it were, not just our tiny little voices. And so, for Jason telling the documentary, he'll need people around him to tell the story with him and for him. And so will Gordo. And I think that these kind of modern tales we're desperately in need of.
That's a beautiful point.
Yeah.
Jason, what do you got?
It's going to be a massive team effort. I'm doing a whole bunch of research with available materials, but once I've got my basic script done, I've gone and done the battlefield tours and made sure everything in terms of my timelines and so on is accurate. I'm going to go right back to the true subject matter experts. Like, for example, I've got a bunch of Tim Cook's books here. Tim Cook is the curator of the World War I exhibit at the Canadian War Museum. He's written the Bibles on Canada and World War I. I've also got multiple books. Brian McInnes is actually Francis Pegahmagabow's great grandson. So reading all about the history of the Ojibwe. I intend to go back to these people at the Vimy Foundation and on, and making sure that everything is as historically accurate in terms of weapon handling, tactics, locations, timelines, language, all of those things, because in this particular case, it's such a story that doesn't need any embellishment. It just needs to be told correctly. There's no way to really put an entire man's life worth of accomplishments into a 2.5 or 3 hour movie. But how do we do it where it makes the audience really think and want to look into more themselves? I think that's the goal of any good movie, or in Gordo's case, documentary, and open their mind to things they had never been exposed to before. And I think the man, his family, and the community deserve that. And I think it's going to be a story that people can really resonate with.
Yeah. Pat, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I don't have much to layer onto this at all. I think that it's great that we have people within this panel that are going to help push that yardstick forward of showing visually some of this history. I think we are lacking. I feel like in the last 10 to 20 years, very much lacking this type of media. You know what I mean? Like on a larger scale, and it could be military history, it could be or military heroism, it could be whatever type of heroism. And I love that we're batting around the definition of it, because it's I think it's important.
Well, it's something that's kicked into my mind is I speak every year at my sons and other schools in my neighborhood at Remembrance Day, and I'm going to use this as my general theme. I'm going to ask the kids, what is a hero? And then I'm going to show them some actual heroes, and maybe they're accurate, maybe they need some adjustment, maybe whatever, but we'll see. They'll get the conversation started, that's for sure. Sean, what do you got?
Another thought, and it's another guest who's a great guest who's been on the show a number of times, Tip Cullen, Royal Marine Commando, Irishman, and a great dude. And of course, not too long ago, they put out their independent movie, Sunray is the name of it. I've watched it a couple of times. It's freaking great, man. And they did that on an indie budget. I know what the budget was, but I said I'd never say it. But it's small. But what they did with that small budget, where they independently funded it themselves, was way better than any Hollywood movie as far as I'm concerned. Because A, it was modern and relevant because the individuals who were in it weren't actors. They were actually the troops. The second piece that really spoke to me is that you could feel the soul in it, man. You could feel the heart in it. Those guys wanted to put a movie together that reflected and represented their brothers in arms. Whereas, Hollywood, to some degree, it's more interested in representing the CGI or the fake-eroniness of a movie. And so, and I know Pat's in the industry. I know that, he's an armourer, and he could probably speak to this way more than I could. But from my perspective, as a casual observer of Hollywood versus the stories that actually need to be told, I feel that there's this chasm, a massive gap between proper storytelling and Robert Downey Jr. putting campaign on his face yet again and pretending to be a tough guy. It sucks, man. I think that the heroism in the actual world has been distorted by the Iron Man heroism that is so fake. But like my own boys, as an example, like they love that idea of Tony Stark because Hollywood's made that dude sexy. But heroism isn't sexy, man. Not at all. Like if anyone's been listening to this, as a hero, you're missing an eye. You've got pneumonia. You got shot in the kidney. What? All of these things that Hollywood fails to actually help people understand that heroism has a cost is just not done well. And so we've got Jason who will do it well. We've got Gordo who will do it well. We've got Tip who's already done it well. And so that's what we need, man, is we need more realistic representation of true heroes rather than Hollywood Boulevard heroes.
I got something for you, Shaun, for everybody here. World War I has been one of those conflicts that's kind of out of people's memories. There's only a few movies on it, but take a wild guess between you guys what the highest grossing World War I based film is. Any guesses? It's not Warhorse. It's not 1917, which just won a whole bunch of Academy Awards. It's not even All Quiet on the Western Front. To your point,
that
Shaun,
was going to be my guess. It was All Quiet on the Western Front, but
it's Wonder Woman.
Oh my God.
No, man.
I'm dead serious. Wonder Woman is so there just solidifies Shaun's point.
Yeah.
What do
you got, Pat?
I was just going to throw in there, and it's a bit of a counterpoint to Shaun's point. We'll go back a couple hundred years. The Tony Starks and Wolverines and Batmans and all that stuff like that. Those are myths. We told those stories to teach about heroism and to teach about extraordinary feats and all these things. And that's where I think the line has become blurred, right? Hollywood has distorted that line between that's not real. We're trying to tell a story. Maybe you'll learn something out of the moral of the story of, say, Hercules, right? Like the Hydra, Hercules fighting a Hydra. You look at the back of the SWASM, the Southwest Asia Service Medal, there's a Hydra on the back. Why? Because, you cut off one head, another head reappears. But the story of Hercules defeating the Hydra, of how he had to cauterize the neck to stop it, then becomes a metaphor, right? So we've lost that story being able to teach us about possibly heroism, right? They aren't heroes. They're teaching us about heroes. And I think there's a huge blur there, of course. And just so anyone knows, if I've ever been credited for anything on military advising or armoring on any shows, I'll tell you which ones they actually took my advice and which ones they didn't. But you'll probably know.
Achilles and David and Goliath and those kind of myths, all teaching the same point as Pat just said.
And when I was a kid growing up in England, I was 8 years old watching Jason and the Golden Fleece.
Yep.
That's an old schooly movie, and literally has Medusa in it and all of the good stuff, the mythology that as a young kid I was being influenced by myths, and it was it inspired me, the mythology of mythological heroes, because I didn't have any in my life. I didn't know what a hero was, and I couldn't have reached out and poked one, but because of the absence of true three-dimensional heroes that I could put my arm around, I had to like find them in my own way, and it was through, Jason the Golden Fleece. Or in 1980, I was reading Iron Man or, you know, Superman or Batman, the comics. Like I couldn't wait to get another comic. And I couldn't even afford comics. I had to go over to my buddy's place and read his comics. And we'd sit down like in silence and just read the comic of the week or of the month up in Grand Cache. And so like my idea of what a hero is was shaped through media until I landed in Camp Wainwright on day one and looked up at that big picture of Tommy Prince. Like that was my first time being around, kind of a media hero, as it were, that was actually a legit hero. And so, there's something to that media piece for sure.
Yeah, the one of my biggest challenges once I got into the military was grenades in movies and like explosions. Now I can't do it. I watch anybody start talking about explosives and I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's painful. But to your guys' point, in those movies, when you look back at The Devil's Brigade, you look at A Bridge Too Far, they were great stories, they were great productions. It was all practical effects. Like there was no CGI. You had to do everything. And one of the things that also bugs me in nowadays is nobody uses blanks. Everything's just post-production, and you see people doing like the little
Lies.
lies.
That's only like I mean, we are on the curtail. Armoring is we're digressing off of the topic, but yeah, we still use a lot of blanks. Like we did Invasion last year with Apple. I fired a lot of blanks on that set. Just so there are times with practical. Like we'll take 6 for example for a quick second. A lot of the writing was based off of real missions that Mitch and Vince had been in, but just curtailed to the series to be a story. And all those dudes wore real plates, real helmets. We shot crap tons of blanks.
I love that. And see, and that's what I think makes when you have a good series or a good movie or something like that, it's usually very practical in its essence. Now we are running a little close on time here. We're almost at 2 hours, but I want to get your guys' final thoughts. Actually, there's a little comment here I want to touch on that is just excellent. Dan C says, heroes are mirrors of the society of the day, which is an interesting thought. And now I'm going to pass this around before we do final thoughts quickly. Jason, what do you think on that?
I'm processing that one because there's a lot to it. Yeah, perhaps today's heroes are a reflection on the society we're living in now, and maybe that's why we're not so impressed with them, given the way that we came up and what our experiences are. Somebody coming back from a broken leg in the NFL and playing the next season is labeled a hero, and you're like, well, really? So it's very contextual, as we were discussing, but there's a lot to process on the mirrored statement for sure.
Yeah, I dig it. Pat, what do you think?
Yeah, I can't add more that Jason just said because it is. One, I guess it's going to resonate in my brain because it's kind of a scary thought. That's what I'll just leave it as. Yeah.
I dig it. Shaun, what do you think?
It's a great comment, but it's a challenging comment because at first blush, at first glance, it kind of makes sense. But as you think about it more, as you take it further down into the layers of what that sentence could mean, it can mean many things. And just to throw a little twist into it, are we holding the mirror up to society, or are we just holding the mirror in front of ourselves and evaluating ourselves as a hero or not? And some people will put that mirror in front of themselves and see a hero because they've never met one. And some people who may be a hero will look at that mirrored image and not see the hero. And so there's many ways that this could be taken. Sadly, we're at 1 hour and 49 minutes, and I don't think we'll be able to dive into it.
Yeah. So before we do shut her down, I mentioned 2 other people in the trailer, and I want to touch on them quickly so that we give them their due diligence for sure. But Mona Parsons from World War II, the only Canadian female civilian to be imprisoned by the Nazis. She helped downed Allied airmen escape while working with the Dutch resistance. She was captured and sentenced to death, which was then later commuted to a life imprisonment. But she escaped from the prison in 1945 and walked across war-torn Europe to freedom. She was honored posthumously as one of Canada's greatest World War II resistance fighters, and that again, to be in occupied Europe and be actively fighting against the Nazis during the war, that was not a light deal for sure. And then Mary Greyeyes, first Indigenous woman to enlist in the Canadian Women's Army Corps. She served as a role model, both breaking both gender and racial barriers. She's famous for a stage photo that was done, but she was working as a driver and support staff during World War II, and was an advocate for Indigenous veterans and recognition after the war. So, like, again, we talk about what heroes are, and it becomes when you see them, it's kind of apparent, but at the same time, when you start to really dive into it, it becomes all sorts of nuance. So let's get some final thoughts on unsung heroes, on anything we've done on Canadian society as a whole, I guess, because we kind of touched on that, but anything at all. Pat, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's important that, as a society and as individuals, we definitely do, try to define without getting too bureaucratically tied up in it. But we need to define heroes, and we need to recognize heroes, because as we sat here and talked, I can't think of one hero or people that I consider heroes that, like when Shaun was talking about, hold a mirror up in front of their own face, would say that they're a hero. Most of them are very humble. Most of them just think that they were just doing what they needed to do at the time, or living their life the way that they believe that it should be lived. And so to take the time and to stop and say, "Yo, like you did something beyond that of anyone would ever do. You are a hero," I think is important.
Yeah, totally agree. Jason, any final thoughts?
Obviously, a lot to unpack with the whole conversation, from heroes of the past that have been lost to history to not recognizing current ones enough and what our definitions of them are. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to go. I think the mirror of society comment really sits with me, and that we need to reframe what a hero really is. And I think, and I hope, that people who've watched this conversation kind of get deep in their mind and take a look at society as a whole. Who we're idolizing? Why? Why are we labeling people certain things? Why are we following them in that way? And how can we just be better at recognizing one or the other within our immediate sphere of influence, and just bring some power and notoriety and honesty back to the word hero, and who are the true unsung ones.
I dig it. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Well, it sounds like the boys are on the same sheet of music as I am, and that is I got a lot of things to think about after this podcast. I've been thinking about a lot of things throughout the podcast, and so if we had more time, I'm sure I'd have more to think about. Unsung heroes, it's a tough one. I think that this conversation as a whole should have every other Canadian, anyone who listens to it, by the way, around the world, thinking about who the unsung heroes are in their life. Because quite frankly, I don't think any hero ever considers themselves a hero. And so let's pretend for a moment you're a hero. Who else in your life is a hero? If you haven't, and I'm not talking about Hollywood, I mean in your neighborhood. And maybe there's none. Maybe there is. But contextualizing your definition before we started the show till now, maybe there's some new heroes in your life that you need to go and recognize.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add. I just think that heroism in general is subjective, and it's up to yourself to be able to understand that. But you can have a better understanding of what a hero is by talking with everyone else. As Shaun says, lean over your fence to your neighbor and start a conversation like, what is a hero to you? Don't actually do that. It might freak some people out. But talk to your friends, talk to your family, engage that conversation, like expand your own view of what a hero is so that you have a better nuance and a better understanding, so that when it does pop up in front of your face, you'll be able to recognize it. And that's all I got. So as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week. Chimo. Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.